Everybody ready? Cool. The 2021 Formula One season is finally underway after a perfect start for Max Verstappen, who took pole ahead of the Mercedes for the first time ever in Bahrain. Welcome back to the Grid Talk Formula One podcast. Today we'll be analysing the results of the Bahrain Grand Prix qualifying in Sakhir. My name is Ruby Price, and joining me today are broadcast journalist Louis Edwards.
Hello.
And co-host of the Monkeyseat Podcast, Tom Horrox.
Hi.
Hey. First, here is a word from our sponsors. Then it gets inserted.
Very professional.
Very professional. Sign up to Manscaped using the code GridTalk20 to get 20% off your first order. So, Louis, we saw that the Red Bulls were fast in testing, and after Max Verstappen denied Mercedes pole position for the first time at the opening race of the season since 2014, it finally looks like we have a proper championship on our hands.
Yeah, it does. It was amazing. Like, there was a little bit of a scare, sort of in like Q1 and Q2. We're thinking, "Oh, is this not going to play out the way that we want to?" Because Max had something came off his floor, and we were kind of questioning whether or not that was going to have a big effect on his performance. But no, he sticks it on pole by 0.4 of a second. A gap that I don't think even I expected. I think it was going to be a little bit closer. But tomorrow's where it all happens. And Red Bull's race pace did look very, very strong, but so did Mercedes. Mercedes also had quite good long run pace. So it's really set up to be a really good race tomorrow.
Yeah, and Tom, obviously there's that big straight going up into turn 4. Lewis Hamilton being in second might actually benefit him.
It's a possibility, but I think looking at the times that we've seen in qualifying today, I think it's genuinely, even if there was a bit of damage to that Red Bull, the Red Bull are in the position that we normally expect to see Mercedes in, and indeed have done ever since the turbo hybrid era started. I mean, Lewis Hamilton's time today was 2.1 seconds slower than last year's time, and by last year I mean 2 races ago. And so for that kind of performance swing, when you look at Verstappen's time only 1.3 seconds slower than last year, that is a big performance swing in just a few races. So I think we're now going to be the people saying thank God for Lewis Hamilton this year, as he's the only one getting between the Red Bulls. If we could potentially be seeing that kind of scenario.
Yeah, he will at least be, feeling content that he's ahead of his teammate, won't he, Tom?
Who, Max or Lewis? Sorry,
Lewis.
Well, yes, absolutely. I mean, Valtteri seemed a bit all over the place, to be honest, all day. I was more shocked at the end that he was as high as third. He seemed to be struggling, and I do think that if the midfield are going to be as close as they appear to be, then Valtteri may be having a very difficult season, squabbling with McLarens, Aston Martins, and Ferraris.
And if he's saying that he's had one of those off seasons where he's trying to get into Lewis's head, Louis, this is not the way to go about it, is it?
No, not at all. As soon as sort of on that final run, and I saw that Bottas was, third, basically like straight away. It's like, yeah, it's just you can already tell, what type of season this is going to be. Bottas needs to be, do what Rosberg did, get on that front foot early, apply that pressure early on in the season. And that's how we beat him. And then being like a few tenths off him in just the first race is never a good sign, because Lewis isn't someone that you can play catch up with. You need to get ahead first and then try and ride it out. And he's just not done that.
Yeah, come Spa, if the last 10 seasons are to be believed, we're going to see Lewis skyrocket come Spa. So, yeah. Tom, in a surprise position, P4, Charles Leclerc in the Ferrari. They've certainly made forward strides with that Ferrari.
Yeah, they definitely appeared to be back in the fight for third. I predicted last season that they would be up fighting for second, but that's when I thought that Red Bull were going to be re-signing Alex Albon. But then after practice and testing, I didn't expect anything of Ferrari at all, and to see Leclerc especially up there in fourth place, it's definitely the back to the heroics that we normally expect to see from Leclerc, and great for Formula One that Ferrari are back up there as well. Although slightly annoyed they're quite as high as they are, but there we go.
Yeah, it's certainly not going to be helpful for your support for
No.
McLaren with seeing a resurgent Ferrari. But Louis, just another point on the Ferrari. He's only 1/10 off Valtteri Bottas. That
Yeah,
if seeing a Ferrari resurgence was shocking, seeing them that close.
yeah. Honestly, it's an absolutely tremendous lap from Charles Leclerc. And he just has this ability to pull out sort of these laps out of just seemingly nothing, and he just again today is another great showing of just what um, Charles Leclerc is capable of. In that Ferrari, it was. But yeah, as you said, like to be that close, it really is a surprise. Tom's already sort of touched on just sort of the performance swing that we've had from last season to this season. It's clearly that Ferrari have done something right, but it's still a long way to go in sort of Ferrari's eyes. But it's a very encouraging start.
Yeah, they must have finally learned how to use their engine properly after having to relearn it last season. So, Tom, Pierre Gasly and the AlphaTauri in P5, we saw that they were strong in testing, but this is a very good start for AlphaTauri.
Yeah,
One of their drivers.
I take it all back. I said again at the end of testing that I wasn't convinced by the Alpha's pace. They tend to do the low fuel running and run on the sniff of an oily rag, as Gary Anderson would say, and just trying to get those quick headline times out. And that's generally how they tend to run things. Same with the other Alpha team. But and looking at the throttle traces, I do think that they were running a slightly higher engine mode through testing than Red Bull were, but. I take it all back. They do genuinely appear to be fast. I mean, Tsunoda looks great, as we'll come on to later on, and unlucky. But Gasly there, he's there, the third best car on that grid. But if you're taking out Perez, potentially the fourth best car on the grid, but in there definitely in the fight for that top three, which is not where I expected the clothing brand to be.
No, not at all. So, Louis, Daniel Ricciardo in P6 in the McLaren. Would you say this is where McLaren expected to be, or would you have thought that they would maybe be P4?
Personally, I think it's sort of roughly where we expected McLaren to be. While we knew that McLaren had come into the season with a good package, it wasn't going to be drastically, amazingly better than the rest of the sort of this midfield pack. And I think what we saw from FP1 and FP2 it kind of deluded us to what we really were going to come to expect from McLaren sort of when it comes to qualifying. But I think 6th and 7th is still very respectable. It puts them in good positions for very high scoring points. And considering they've got both cars in 6th and 7th, while, the likes of, Red Bull, AlphaTauri, Ferrari only have that sort of one car, which is sort of really high up. I think it definitely gives them the advantage, and it also means that they could play around with strategy tomorrow.
Yeah, and Tom, on that note as well, Lando Norris directly behind Daniel Ricciardo, in the same tenth of a second, 129.9 for their their Q3 laps. Maximum extraction from the package in qualifying.
I think so, and I think, as Louis already said, where McLaren's strength were last year was they always had two cars in 5th, 6th, 7th place, picking up those points. Not so much the headline race wins and podiums, but just always having two people there with a good, solid, reliable package. And I think that's going to carry on this season. And although we still see them in there in 6th and 7th place in the race, I think you will. I can't see anyone behind them, with the possible exception of maybe Sainz coming through, and I can see them out racing and out strategizing the AlphaTauri and the Ferrari. So I would definitely be looking for a 4th and a 5th place for McLaren tomorrow. Whether they can achieve that, it's all going to be a lot down to luck and the start and how things play out. But it's not bad. I mean, Norris will be disappointed that he's been outdone by his teammate on their first race together, given that he seemed to have an edge over him for the whole weekend. So he'll definitely be disappointed in that, and he'll be looking to change that in the race. But yeah, it's a good, solid start. Not headline grabbing, but solid.
So I think McLaren, after everything that they've been through over the last half a decade, solid is what they're after. Headlines can come later. But yeah, Louis, Carlos Sainz in P8 behind the McLarens had an issue at the end of Q1, but good job from Ferrari, and I don't often say that, to get his car back out into a position to be challenging in Q3.
Yeah, it was a bit of a scare. He took the exit curve of turn two very, very hard, and it caused some sort of engine issue, and he managed to sort of get it going again, just to get it back to the garage. And yeah, from there, I think could have just been like a bit of a soft reboot on the engine and everything, and they got it going again. And again, Carlos Sainz went out there, did what he can. And while Charles Leclerc did, manage to sort of grab that fourth place, I think eighth is still very respectable considering we were shocked and stunned at the fact that Ferrari wasn't even, getting into Q3 last season. It was one of those cars that were, really struggling to get there, and to have, them both there, I think just shows quite impressive improvement from Ferrari this season. And like Tom said, I think it does give him a good chance against the two McLarens tomorrow. I think there's probably more from Carlos from what we've seen. But I think he can't be too disappointed. I think there's definitely sort of places that he can go from where he is.
Yeah, it certainly took me off guard seeing the two Ferraris go P1 and P2 in Q2, but obviously on new soft tyres with all the actual front runners going on the mediums, it was going to happen. So Tom, moving on to P9, the new boy Fernando Alonso in the Alpine, not bad for someone who's been out of the sport for 2 years.
No, I think he'll be very happy with that, with his somewhat interrupted pre-season, having to have that titanium plate in his jaw for the whole season. I don't care who you are, that's not going to be easy to work with. But beating his teammate on his first race in the car is would be mission accomplished for Fernando, I think. I know Ocon was a little bit lined by the yellow flags, which I'm sure we'll touch on when we get to him. But he would definitely be happy to head of both Aston Martins. Is a silver lining there, but he'll be disappointed to be behind the Ferraris, given where we thought the Ferraris were. But yeah, again, good start, and mostly based on where he is ahead of his teammate and those Aston Martins. But yeah, there's lots more to come from Fernando, I'm sure.
Yeah, absolutely. It's going to be. He's here for at least a long haul over this season. He wasn't expecting to come back and grab, P1 in the Alpine on the first race. So Louis, he was having a bit of an out of sync day today, but Lance Stroll, obviously the last car of the top 10, the lead Aston Martin car, which I think might have taken a few people by surprise, but P10 in the Aston Martin, a lot of people had a lot of high hopes for the car this season, but is this where we're expected to see them?
Yeah, Aston Martin were really stumped by their sort of poor pre-season sort of running, and it really looked like both Lance and Sebastian were struggling to really get to grips with the car. And I think it kind of manifested today. Stroll, I think, did the best he can. I think it's pretty good that he managed to get it, into the top 10. I think, given some of what we've seen in free practice, I think some people might have not thought that was, completely possible, but they still managed to do it. But I think it is where we kind of expect Aston Martin to be. It's clear that something's not quite right with that car, and but as long as Lance can keep getting into Q3, keep at least giving the team chance for points, it's something we can probably hopefully will see improvement on as the season goes on.
Yeah, and certainly a little bit of a step backwards from this time last year, but you can't keep using someone else's car from the year before. So, Tom, moving on to perhaps one of the shocks of this qualifying session, Sergio Perez in the Red Bull, P11 out in Q2, probably was on the back foot from as soon as he had that lap time deleted in Q2.
Yeah, I mean, how long before the bring back Albon chants start, eh? It's oh dear for Perez. I do really feel for him. But I mean, if you look at it on I shoulder some of the blame on Red Bull for not insisting that he go out on the softs. Traffic on his first run didn't help. They they should have then said, at that point, hindsight's great, but they should have then said, okay, this, it's too much of a risk. We need both cars in there. But they didn't. But in the end, even with traffic, he was only zero point 0.3 off Max in Q2. I know they would have been nurturing tyres, but if he'd have finished Q3 0.3 behind Max Verstappen, it would have been a Red Bull 1-2, and what a different conversation we'd be having. So I don't think it's completely a disaster for Perez, but it's definitely left him with some work to do. He does still get free tyre choice though, so that's the key thing. He does still get free tyre choice for the next race, so you'll see him moving forwards definitely. He maybe could be one that challenges the McLarens further up actually, but yes, he's not ideal. Definitely, he's going to be upset with himself. He's going to be upset with the team, and the team really should have done better by him, in my opinion. But yeah, he will come forward in the race, and I'm sure he will be up there challenging Max at some point this season.
Yeah, and if there's any driver that's experienced at starting around where he is, Sergio Perez is probably the driver you want in that position. He'll expect the crunch up that you're going to get going into turn one at the start. He's been shown to be good on his tyres in a lot of races. Starting on fresh tyres, as you mentioned, will be a very key thing for Sergio Perez. So definitely not the best place to be, but also not the worst for him. So, Louis, Antonio Giovinazzi, the lead Alfa Romeo, and if it's going to be anything like last season, he could also be challenging into that top 10 at the start of tomorrow's race. But P12, compared to where Alfa Romeo finished last season, that's not bad.
No, I think it was quite impressive from Antonio Giovinazzi. He put in a very solid sort of lap in Q2, and I think he was only a few tenths really off getting into that top 10. I think it was a very good lap and a very strong performance. And I think it's a really good basis to where sort of Alfa Romeo are this season. It's clear that they have improved from last year, and it's clear that they are, while Williams and Haas do seem to be the sort of the slower of those sort of the backfield cars, it does look like maybe Alfa Romeo has taken a step, and hopefully we'll see in the race tomorrow that they can actually compete maybe for points a little bit more often than we saw last season, which I think will be great because, this midfield is so tight, and we've seen it, today, like just how close each and every session was, just to keep, having teams go into that midfield battle is, it's nothing but good for the sport, and it's nothing but good for the entertainment that we'll hopefully get. But I kind of hope that Giovinazzi can get a good start, maybe sort of mixing with the top 10, and I think it could be an interesting race.
Yeah, you are absolutely right about it being close as well today. At the end of Q2, the top 4 cars were separated by 0.0 of a second, and that's not something we've seen in a while. But Tom, on to what we were all excited for him. Yuki Tsunoda was lighting up the timing screens, and then they stayed out on the medium tires in Q2, if I remember correctly, and he just didn't have it in the end to get into Q3.
Yeah, I mean, it goes to show just how far AlphaTauri have come, that they can actually attempt that confidently, that they can do that. I think slightly naive of them to think, this is the ultimate pace, and that Tsunoda is going to have that consistency that he would need at this stage of his development. So again, I put more blame on AlphaTauri there for putting just too much pressure on the young lad. I mean, his dynamic pacing in Q1 was fantastic. I mean, was he second quickest in Q1? Really took people by surprise, and potentially that is probably what undid him. 6 tenths behind his teammate in Q2 was enough to drop him out, and Pierre obviously then given the chance to fight in that top 10. So I do place the blame more on AlphaTauri there than at Tsunoda. He's going to have some fun though, because he's going to have a quick car, and he's starting back in the pack, and I think he'll be able to move forwards. So that's only good for the race, to be honest. Having a nice a young rookie is clearly quick in a quick car, trying to make some overtakes.
Yeah, and clearly has that desire as well to move further up the field, Yuki Tsunoda. Louis, Kimi Räikkönen, P14. At some points in the last season, we ended up seeing him as the lead Ferrari car. I don't think that's going to happen this season based on the performance of Ferraris today. But Kimi Räikkönen, it's going to be a mixed bag for him.
Yeah, I think it's kind of similar to what I said about Antonio Giovinazzi. It's good that Alfa Romeo have both of their cars in Q2 and sort of on the cusp of points. It's just really where they can take it from there. If they can make the most out of any potential chaos that goes on in the sort of the middle of the pack, especially on lap one. How sort of very tight, very sort of people do like to get their elbows out, especially with the way that turn 1 and 2 and 3 are at Bahrain. It's quite easy for cars to sort of get jostled, pushed wide, and for incidents to happen. So I think if both of the cars keep their nose clean, they could definitely be challenging for points. And Kimi he's got a wise old head on his shoulders, and he should hopefully know how to make the most of it. He's been racing in Bahrain for God knows how many years now, so I think while points may not be a guarantee, I think it's something definitely that we could see them potentially fighting for.
Yeah, and you've got to be. He's ahead of those cars behind him that we would expect to stay behind him. So everything ahead of him that happens is another chance for points. And as long as he doesn't drive into the side of another car, as we saw on a couple of occasions, he's got to be. He'll be in that position if there are reliability issues ahead. It is the start of the season after all, and that's normally when they tend to show up. So, Tom, Mr. Saturday, George Russell made it into Q2. Slower than his Q1 time, and if I remember correctly, he was out on used soft, so that's an interesting strategy choice from Williams there.
Yeah, that was a little bit confusing, given that they have got so many tyres for the race. Given, I confess I haven't actually seen how many tyres they used in practice, but they should have had a reasonable allocation available to them. So why they would save so many sets of soft tyres for the race, I'm not really sure, given that the medium tyres is likely to be the tyre that they're going to stick on. But I mean, yeah, just doing the one run in the gap, clearly not interested in doing a competitive time. But at the end of the day, he's just behind a world champion and ahead of a 4-time world champion, so it's still not a bad position to start. He's ahead of Ocon in the other Alpine, so I think he probably could have got a little bit further up, but I just don't think Williams were expecting anything from this race. The windy conditions that were expected is going to massively hamper their peaky, small windowed aerodynamic car. So I think you're only starting 15th. I think you're still going to see George going backwards, unfortunately, in the race. And I think the Williams, where they are at the moment, they're clearly not on a par with the Alphas, but they are definitely ahead of the Russian lawnmowers slightly further back. So that's something. If they can move forward to 9th and challenge for 8th, that's going to be a successful season. And if we get a crazy race where things go wrong and George or Nicholas just hit the sweet spot, then they could get some points this year. At least they're in a position where they can fight in that midfield and they're not adrift.
Yeah, you would absolutely hope that the Williams were ahead of an undeveloped Haas car from last season. But yeah, Louis, as was mentioned earlier, Esteban Ocon might have got caught out by the yellow flag of the other Haas driver earlier in the session. But he had the same first sector time as Fernando Alonso, but P16 is not where Alpine would want to have been starting today, given their performance in preseason testing.
No, it's not. It's not ideal. It's not ideal. It's far from ideal. Where Alpine really wanted to, kick off the season. I really thought sort of Alpine were a kind of a dark horse going into this sort of season, and yeah, it's disappointing to say the least. But yeah, when you've been caught out sort of by something that isn't your own fault, it can be quite frustrating. And I think there definitely was a possibility of getting him at least into Q2. I think the car definitely had the pace to do so, as shown by Fernando Alonso. But it just wasn't going to be. I think he's going to have quite a difficult time getting through that sort of that mid-pack and scoring points tomorrow, because it's incredibly feisty, as we've already talked about. The teams and the drivers that are ahead of him are very competitive. And they're also going to be looking to push forward. And I think it's going to be very difficult for Ocon, being in the position that he is. I think he's just going to have to take this race as it goes, hope some luck is thrown his way, and just just see what he can do, really. Maybe play with some sort of alternate strategies. Maybe see if we make sort of any sort of just make any gains in any virtual safety cars tomorrow. But I'm not expecting any sort of raw pace that is going to sort of yield points.
Yeah, as you mentioned, there are two very fast Honda-powered cars ahead of him. There's two Ferrari-powered Alfa Romeos that were consistent during preseason testing. He might get a couple of places off the line, but Esteban Ocon is going to be a long afternoon for a car that could have potentially been much further up the grid. Tom, moving on to George Russell's teammate, Nicholas Latifi. For once not on the back of the grid, he'll at least be taking pleasure in that, and also outpacing Sebastian Vettel in that Aston Martin.
Yeah, he's looking much more at home. I think he seemed a little bit like a fish out of water last year. He just seemed adrift at the back, and George being so much faster than him. I think this year you're going to see him having a bit more of a go of it. He's going to attack George a bit more in the qualifying sessions, especially if the car's going to be quite challenging at certain times. I think he'll probably find the sweet spot where on the odd race when George won't quite get there, so and he'll just unlock a little bit more potential on the odd occasion. So I can see Latifi doing actually looking like a Formula One driver this year. I think the machinery he had last year was definitely not something that helped his reputation. I mean, we took the mick out of him quite a lot on our podcast, so he's kind of a bit of a clean slate this year. I hope he moves forward, because everyone always says what a nice guy he is, but everyone always said that about Alex Albon as well. So I do genuinely want him to do well. But yeah, he's just behind Ocon, ahead of a four-time world champion and a Schumacher. That's never a bad place to start a race. So yeah, good luck to him for tomorrow. He's going to need it.
Yeah, I think approaching Williams this season with a bit of optimism could work for once, and I think there's some justified optimism around that Williams garage for the context of where they've been for the last couple of years. But Louis, Sebastian Vettel, P18, and his new team of Aston Martin, this obviously won't have been what he was after when he left Ferrari, but, was it just being caught out by that yellow flag, or is it just an underlying issue with this Aston Martin for him?
I think it's kind of a mix of both. It was quite clear that Vettel wasn't completely at home with that Aston Martin car. He was still struggling with it sort of through free practice and not quite, finding his setup. And, his first run was really nothing special, which is the reason why he was out. And then, his second run, he was plagued by the fact there was a car facing the wrong way at turn one. And then when he was, halfway around the track trying to make up some of the lap time that he'd lost, he had Carlos Sainz in a sort of half broken down Ferrari to then contend with. So, yeah, it was really unfortunate for Vettel. And sort of like Ocon, I can't really see him sort of making up a significant amount of places. It's quite clear that Aston Martin is a little all over the place, not completely stable. And with the sort of the high winds that are forecast for tomorrow, I think that's going to make it, even more difficult for him to really push forward. So I think he's just going to have to take this one in the chin and then just move on to the next race and hopefully, start again and show really what this Aston Martin is potentially capable of.
Who knows? We might even see the return of the famous Spinala from Sebastian Vettel tomorrow. So, Tom, Mick Schumacher on his debut for Haas Ferrari, ahead of his teammate, he'll at least be taking that as a bonus. But when your teammate's spinning around every time he goes on the track, that shouldn't really be too hard.
No, I did quite enjoy the that moment in Q1 when he was top of the times. Granted, it was a time, as he was the only one on there. That was the only time he was ever going to be top. So kept his nose clean, just kept out of everyone's way, kept it on the track, which is more than his teammate managed to do. So there's not really. It's going to be a long season for him. The cars, as we've already touched on, the car's not going to get any better. The only gains that Haas is going to have made from last year is whatever that Ferrari engine is better. So the only hope they had to beat any teams was that car, that engine was better than what Williams added to their package, and I don't think it is. So they are going to be at the back. It's going to be a fight between Schumacher and his teammate all season. So it's going to be incredibly unlikely that we're going to see them troubling the point scorers at any point. So it's just going to be a long season. I just feel for the guy. I really do, because I think he deserves his chance. And it's just not going to be. He's not going to be able to show what he can do. But then Ayrton Senna couldn't show what he could do in his first season, and then look what happened to him. So and he's the same age as his dad when his dad started as well. So there's still hope.
Yeah, there's absolutely still hope. You never know. We might get another 7-time world champion in a Schumacher. So Louis, on to his teammate in the other Haas. As I've mentioned, he was spinning almost every time he was on track. It's just not the consistency that Haas need for, this season, other than the consistency performing at the back.
Yeah, it just really goes to show that billions of dollars or just really can't buy your talent, really. And he was absolutely all over the place with the cars today. We saw him backwards in the gravel, and then we saw him backwards on track. And you just got to ask yourself, how has this happened? I still haven't actually seen a single replay of either of his spins. So I still actually don't know even what happened. Whether it was actually his fault, whether it was something with the car. I think actually his first spin was because he was just absolutely riding the curbs, and it's just never a good thing to do, especially with the current sort of cars. That second spin just seems so perplexing to me. But yeah, last on the grid. He may not be last on the grid. We don't know. Of course, there could still be numerous penalties awarded for the fact that he had spun around at turn 1 and people had gone through while there were yellow flags. We're still yet to see, but it doesn't bode well. But you never know. He might try and take out the 10 cars ahead of him at the start of the grid just to try and make up some places. It wouldn't be the first time he's tried that.
Yeah, it is an interesting strategy of trying not to start last, causing all your rivals to have to move backwards 5 places. But then you're just going to move backwards 5 places during the race, so it doesn't exactly look as good anyway. But Tom, then moving on to our predictions for tomorrow, is Max Verstappen going to stay in first? Are you predicting a Verstappen win?
Do you know what? I'm going to make people's hearts sink. I am predicting a Lewis Hamilton win tomorrow. And the reason I'm doing that is because, yet again, Red Bull do not have the second driver there to help. I think you're going to see Hamilton, say, potentially getting a bit of draft off Verstappen down the long back straight. If he doesn't get him at turn 1, I think you'll see some kind of strategy element coming into it. Perhaps maybe early stopping Bottas. This is, of course, unless Charles Leclerc can get ahead of Bottas. If that happens, then all bets are off. And I think Verstappen's best chance is for Charles Leclerc to do him a favour. If he can get in amongst it, then there's a chance. But I do think it's with Bottas there, with Lewis. I think Mercedes have got a very good chance there. They say they could undercut Bottas, and Bottas may well get the victory. Bottas tends to win the first race of the season. We may get to hear these are whom it may concern again, and if we do, then that's it for me. I'm just not gonna acknowledge Bottas again if he does that again. But so I do think it's going to be Mercedes win, and my money's going to be on Lewis Hamilton.
Yeah, if Bottas does win tomorrow, that will be his second win in the last 17 races. So
championship form.
That's something to concern for other people. But I agree with you. Lewis Hamilton, I think, is either going to Mercedes will either out strategy Red Bull, or he'll get him on that run up to turn 3 and 4. So Louis, who are you expecting to be on that top step tomorrow?
Well, I haven't done the preview show. I have already thought I had to think about this, and honestly, I think I'm going to stick with sort of my predictions. I'm going to be a sort of a man of my words, from a week ago, and I'm going to say it is going to be Max Verstappen. I think I said Max Verstappen. I think it's going to be. I think whilst you both make absolutely perfectly good points. I've sort of my strategy element sort of comes into the fact that Bottas is terrible at getting off the line, especially in Bahrain. We've seen it twice, well, literally both races last year, completely bottled the start. And if he does that, then you're going to have, Leclerc there, you're going to have Gasly, even potentially, one of the McLarens then in front of Bottas, which could really sort of leave the race sort of wide open. But I have faith in the Red Bull. and in the in Max's ability to control the race and keep Lewis behind. He is quite an aggressive driver, which is probably putting it lightly, but I still think he can pull it off.
Yeah. So finishing off your podium then, Tom, P2 and P3 tomorrow?
Oh, do you know, I think it's probably going to be the Hambot one of any three of those three in whichever order. I would like to say that we're going to see Daniel Ricciardo or Lando Norris challenge the top three, but based on their starting position with Leclerc and Gasly ahead of them, I don't think that's going to happen. You could potentially see a repeat of the podium last year in Austria of Verstappen and Bottas and Leclerc on the podium. That would be my outsider bet. If you were that way inclined in betting, but I think it's probably going to be Hamilton, Bottas, Verstappen in some order.
Louis, are you going to stick with your other predictions from the preview?
I am, and that is going to be Hamilton second naturally, and then I put Daniel Ricciardo in third. There's nothing. Where's life without a bit of excitement and a bit of hope? Daniel Ricciardo, I think, has shown that he's managed to get to grips with that McLaren quite well, and he's one to shy away from a breaking battle with his fellow drivers. I think if he gets a good start tomorrow, perhaps maybe gets ahead of either one of Gasly or Leclerc, I think he can really push on, and we'll then see what the Mercedes are really capable of, especially over a long distance. I know it's probably going to be a bit of a push, and I'm probably relying on some reliability issues or a bit of a knock between, let's say, Leclerc and Bottas at the start. I don't know. I am kind of maybe pushing my luck a bit, but I am going to stick with Ricciardo in third.
Yeah, I think I'd quite like to, for the sake of the championship and it being Hamilton's sole challenger, I'd like to see Verstappen on the podium. I think provided he has a clean race, and my other suggestion of Lewis actually finishing on the top, I think if Max has a clean race, he could be P2. And then I'm just going to finish off with Charles Leclerc in that Ferrari. He was strong in Bahrain when Ferrari last had a competitive car here, and probably would have won without the reliability. So Charles Leclerc finishes off the top three for me. Tom, who was your star of qualifying?
I think it's difficult to look past Charles Leclerc, but you could potentially say Pierre Gasly as well. I think either of those two. I'm probably going to go for Pierre Gasly actually, because that's was not what I was expecting from either of those cars. So it's very very close. But Gasly starting the season very strong, just like he started last season, and proving that the hype is actually worth the hype at the moment. So yeah, I would say for me it's Pierre Gasly, driver of the day.
Yeah, ever since that demotion from Red Bull, Pierre Gasly has been one hell of a driver. Louis, your star of qualifying?
See, originally what it might have been Yuki Tsunoda if AlphaTauri hadn't screwed up his strategy somewhat. But I think overall I'm going to give it to Charles Leclerc. I think he did an absolutely phenomenal drive to get that Ferrari to P4, absolutely stunning lap, and even really wasn't, only a few tenths off after Bottas in third. I think that's quite impressive turnaround from what we saw from Ferrari last season.
And for the sake of not finishing 10 seconds off pole time, I'm going to give it to No, I'm not. I'm going to give it to Max Verstappen. We were expecting him to be top, and he then delivered on that. There is a lot of pressure on Red Bull to be challenging Mercedes this season, and stopping Mercedes' first season opening pole, that's an achievement. To say that they've had such a domination at the start of each season. So Tom, a bold prediction from you, please, for tomorrow.
Well, I've already put it in the chat. My bold prediction is going to be that Schumacher gets punted off by his teammate.
That's quite a possibility,
I
actually.
was about to
based
say
on
that's
his
not very.
previous
That
Okay,
doesn't
if that's-
seem very
if-
bold.
if you want- Okay. If you want something more bold than that, then I will go with a McLaren podium.
I mean, fingers crossed, fingers crossed. Louis, your bold prediction, please.
Vettel in the top 10.
Vettel in the top 10. That is bold.
That is very bold.
Were you basing that off last year's statistics as well?
Maybe. Yeah, I was like, I think Sebastian in the top 10 was just sort of like, it was kind of something I was hoping for a lot last year. Like, it's one that I often picked. But I think I'm going to stick with it for the first race at least. Hopefully, it won't continue as the season sort of goes on.
Yeah. I think I'm going to say Sergio Perez in P4 as my bold prediction. You know, we've said that he's got a good race car and he's a good driver, but getting from P11 to P4, hopefully he pulls it off, but it could be a bit, the odds are against him at least. So, with all of that in mind, we are newly available on Verbal, as well as Amazon Music, YouTube, Spotify, Google Podcasts, Apple Music, Omni Studio, and Pocket Casts. Just search for F1 Grid Talk. We have a huge back catalogue of shows. We've reviewed at least the last 2 seasons of Formula One, so there's plenty of content for you to get your ears around when there isn't a race weekend. We are on Reddit. Search for the subreddit F1 Grid Talk. And we have a Patreon for mics, lights, and better recording equipment. We will be still providing a F1 post show on Facebook. So if you are listening to this after the show's already gone out, do like us on Facebook, F1 Chronicle Official, and you can watch these as we record them. But other than that, we will be back tomorrow to review the results of the Bahrain Grand Prix. Thank you very much for listening, and goodbye.